Join us for The Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is The Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GBNews.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To the Point.
Tonight on Farage, no jab, no job. That's what 1.2 million NHS workers are about to be told. We go back into the English Channel. Madness today, huge numbers arriving, lifeboats still out searching for migrant boats in the pitch black. We'll go to America, where, as I predicted on this show for the last two evenings, the Republicans have won the governorship of the state of Virginia. And joining me on Talking Pints, musical impresario Pete Waterman.
I'm Tamsin Roberts, and these are your latest headlines. Former Tory Cabinet Minister Owen Patterson says he now has the opportunity to clear his name after avoiding suspension through a Commons vote. The Standards Committee had recommended a 30-day ban for breaching lobbying rules. He says the last 2 years have been hell. MPs voted to approve an amendment on the rules surrounding parliamentary conduct. Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner has described the result as a disgrace. The British skipper caught up in the post-Brexit fishing row has been told he can leave France immediately. A French court has also ruled that the captain of the Scottish trawler does not have to pay a deposit for the release of his boat. Authorities had demanded he pay a bond of more than £120,000. The head of South Western Rail has praised the driver involved in a collision near Salisbury on Sunday, saying his actions prevented a much more serious incident. Managing Director Claire Mann says the driver, who remained in hospital, reacted correctly under the circumstances. Investigators say the train ran 220 metres past a red signal before hitting another train. The driver attempted to apply the brakes, but the wheels slipped on the tracks and the train didn't stop as it should. The UK's financial companies have been given 2 years to submit their plans to achieve net zero targets. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, told the COP26 conference they'll be checked against standards set out by green industry leaders. He says the role financial firms play will be vital in tackling climate change. The number of migrants crossing the English Channel has topped 20,000 this year. That's double the total for the whole of 2020. Yesterday, UK authorities rescued or intercepted 456 people who had navigated busy shipping lanes travelling from France in small boats. Football fans have been paying their respects to former Scotland boss Walter Smith in Glasgow. Thousands of people gathered outside the Ibrox Stadium to see the funeral cortege. The ex-Rangers and Everton manager died last week at the age of 73. Spain has cancelled all flights to and from the island of La Palma because of heavy ash from an erupting volcano. Authorities on the Canary Island are telling people who live near it to stay indoors. They've also halted school classes. The volcano has been spewing lava, ash and gases for more than 6 weeks, and more than 7,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. Well, that's your news update. Now let's get back to Farage.
Last week, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, said he was leaning towards vaccinations being compulsory for all NHS staff. And I said to you, when this government says it's leaning towards doing something authoritarian, it almost certainly means that they are going to do it. And today, it is generally widely accepted across all forms of media that from April, everybody that works for the National Health Service will have to be double vaccinated. Now, I did make some points last week about this. The first being, of course, that half of NHS staff don't interact with patients but work in offices. And the other point that bothered me about it was, and whilst I'm for having the vaccine myself, absolutely, but whether you've had the vaccine or not had the vaccine, both of you can still carry the virus and transmit it on to anybody else. Surely the point of the vaccine is that it protects you from getting seriously ill far more than it protects anybody else around you. Now, 100,000 staff at the NHS have as yet not had the vaccine, and we do, from the care home sector, have an example of this already. This law has come in already, that you have to be double vaccinated to work in the care home sector. 13,000 people have just simply left the care home industry at a time when the industry is trying to recruit, and an estimated, according to the Telegraph, an estimated 63,000 people just haven't had the jabs. So given all of that, does it make sense? Is no jab, no job right? Let me know what you think, please. GBviews at gbnews.uk or tweet at GBnews. Well, joining me to go through this and think about some of the legalities of what's going on is Beverley Sunderland, Managing Director at Crossland Employment Solicitors. Beverley, good evening and welcome to GB News.
Good evening, Nigel. Thank you for inviting me on.
Now, just on the legal side of this to begin with, is there any precedent in employment law in this country for private companies or the state insisting that their staff fulfil certain medical requirements, including having vaccines?
It's a fairly wide question. I'm not aware of any. I have to say that it has been bandied about that surgeons, it's compulsory that they should have vaccinations against hepatitis. But actually, I don't believe that it's actually mandatory. I think it is recommended. So in answer to your question, I'm certainly not aware of any. But now a law has been passed, and certainly in relation to care home staff, and as you have said, most likely coming in respect of NHS staff. And that's something of a game changer.
And does the employee have any rights in this situation, or do they simply have to comply or lose their job?
Well, one of the fair reasons for dismissing an employee is if it is unlawful to continue to employ them. Now, if they are working in a care home, they are a care assistant, they can't do anything else, there isn't another job for them, the employer has really got no option. They are going to have to terminate their employment. Now, in the olden days, they might have gone to Europe and complained that the laws had been implemented and that they were contrary, say, to EU directives on discrimination. Now their only hope would be to go to the European Convention on Human Rights, which of course we are still part of, and complain that it is contrary particularly to Article 9, perhaps freedom of thought and conscience and religion. So really that's their only option.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole point of Brexit, I guess, Beverley, is that we make our own laws, whether they're good laws or bad laws, but we make our own laws, and in a sense, you back that up. So it seems to me, with the care sector, that what was done was the attempt, and there are, whatever it is, 10, 12, 15% of the country who just do not want to take this vaccine. Some of them don't want to take any vaccines. And it's unlikely that that core of people are going to change their mind, even if they're bullied, because the attempt to bully people in the care home sector simply hasn't worked, has it?
Well, let me just take you back a step. I don't think I accept the word bully. And picking up on your introduction to this particular topic, and you were saying, well, you can still pass it on, but there is now Public Health England research which shows that even after a first jab, you are between 38 and 45% less likely to pass it on to someone else. Okay. So it's got to be a balance of risk. When we've had 14,000 people die in our care homes, we have to do all we reasonably can, in my personal belief, to make sure that our elderly are protected.
I understand the point you're making. It was Boris Johnson, in fact, the Prime Minister last week, that said having the jab doesn't mean you can't catch COVID, doesn't mean you can't pass it on. But if there is a substantially reduced risk of that, well, then I'm pleased to hear it. The reason I use the word bully, Beverly, is, if I say to you, do as I say, I believe this is right, or you will lose your job, I don't think bullying is an inappropriate use of a word, do you?
Well, I think that if you were to say that without it being against a backdrop of a global pandemic with millions dying, with hard statistics which now show that actually you reduce the risk if people are vaccinated, then I think put in that light, it is a different question, really, isn't it? Because what government are saying, and don't get me wrong, I don't agree with everything that the government says, but I do agree with this particular law, because if this was my mother or my father in a care home, I would want to know that absolutely everything had been done to stop the risk. They're not going to stop it completely. So I don't think that you can look at it in isolation.
No, OK, that's a very, very fair point. Beverly Sunderland, thank you for coming on and making it. Well, let's go from the legal side of this argument to the front lines. I'm joined now by Tony Stein, Chief Executive of Healthcare Management Solutions, which operates around about 70 care homes across the UK. Tony, good evening and thank you for joining me.
Good evening, Nigel. Thanks for inviting me.
So I'm fascinated by this. Everyone's told it's the law, it's coming into effect, and still people either leave the industry, your industry, or simply refuse to get the vaccine. I mean, it hasn't really worked, has it? This government ploy hasn't really worked, and my concern is, with the National Health Service, we'll finish up by April short of nurses, short of staff.
Well, OK, I think we need to go back a step. I mean, COVID's been a journey for us all. We've learnt a lot throughout the last 2 years. The evidence and the information available has changed. We took a view quite early on that we would have preferred for us not to have had a mandatory vaccination policy for existing workers. We believe that the individuals have the right to choose. We adopted a policy of signposting and educating and so on. So to try and encourage people to look at the right information from the right sources and make their own reasoned decision. Our workers aren't stupid. They're very intelligent people. They're quite capable of assessing risk. And we believed at the time that they would choose probably to go down the route of taking the vaccination. And before it was even mandated, we'd achieved somewhere in the region of 90% vaccination amongst our care home staff group. So we had a very, very high rate of take-up anyway. And when the evidence came out that actually if you were double vaccinated, you were less likely to be transmitting the disease, less likely, not it wasn't possible, but you were going to be less likely to transmit it, then actually we hoped that everybody would take it up. We have around about 2,000 staff in our English care homes, and only 23 of those by the 11th of November won't be double vaccinated.
OK, that's a very small percentage. And as far as those 23 are concerned, you simply can't use them anymore.
No, unfortunately not. Again, I think when you get down to levels like that, our view would have been that we could have taken alternative actions, such as maybe getting them to continue to wear PPE and continue to test them and so on to protect our residents. I think the issue, though, Nigel, is a bit of a red herring, and the issue really is that this on its own is not the problem for us. We've had a staffing problem in the care sector for decades. I've been in this business for 20 years now, running care homes, and we've always had problems recruiting staff. And I think it's got its roots in a number of things, but the primary one is that actually working in care is misconceived as a sort of dead-end job, low-paid job, not valued by society. And I think we failed our children over the last 2 decades, 3 decades, by not teaching them the true value of vocations. I think these people, we were clapping on our front doorsteps, if you remember, banging pans because of the incredible work that these people were doing. And yet, you know, they're still effectively a minimum wage job, and that shouldn't happen. And you know, I think this is the root of it. This is just one issue that's added to a lot of others. It's not the root of the problem.
No, and of course the root of the care home disasters that happened in some cases was, of course, the hospitals being emptied, insufficient checks being done. On balance, Tony, people have left the sector, but on balance, do you think the law is the right law?
I think it possibly is. I mean, as I said, I'd have preferred not to do it. We're there now. It will have an impact. We just have to live with it. But I think what we need to do as a society is we need to refocus away from this onto some of the core issues, start to value our carers, pay them the right wage, and you know, we could move on and maybe help to fix that staffing crisis that we're all about to hit.
Tony Stein, thank you very much indeed. Well, you've heard the arguments, the legal arguments, the practical arguments. I still feel very uncomfortable with a society that divides people up into the jabbed and the jab-nots, but that's where we are. Last night, I reported as a lead story that the English Channel was busy, that we've gone through, considerably through, the 20,000 mark of people who've arrived crossing illegally from France so far this year. I also said that the rest of mainstream media was completely obsessed with COP26 and would barely cover the story. Well, I wasn't disappointed. This morning's Guardian, nothing. This morning's Mirror, nothing. This morning's Express, nothing. This morning's Times, nothing. This morning's Mail, a piece on page 21. This morning's Sun, a tiny piece on the bottom of page 2. This morning's Telegraph, a slightly bigger piece on page 2. Not a single photograph in any one of our main national newspapers. Precious little coverage elsewhere. I also said to you last night that today would be even busier. I said 400 to 500 yesterday. The official number was 454, I think. Today, well, today is going to be even more. And joining me in the studio is Mark White, GBNews Home Affairs and Security Editor. Mark, I'm hearing that some of the RNLI lifeboats, one in particular, has been on the go since 2 o'clock this morning, and it's still out.
Yeah, that just shows you how bad it is. 2 a.m. this morning, the Dungeness lifeboat was called out to intercept a boat carrying migrants. Now, just in the last hour, it's been called out again to intercept another boat, 35 migrants on board. You can see here, this is one of the lifeboats coming into Dover earlier today, absolutely packed out with people on board, Nigel. And not just them, the Border Force vessels, various vessels have been coming in and out today. 6 times now, we believe at least the Dungeness lifeboat has been out. Again, the same for the Dover lifeboat. It is also out this evening to a rescue which is taking place off St Margaret's Bay, about 10 miles offshore. 30 people on that particular
and this
boat.
is in pitch black.
Pitch black, and the conditions are getting worse.
And deteriorating weather, yeah.
The Coast Guard helicopter has been called out to the incident off Hastings. We're told about 10 miles off Hastings that the Dungeness lifeboat is currently involved in. There are reported to be some women and children on board that vessel, 35, we believe. But again, you mentioned the figure there, well over 450 yesterday. It is now looking like we will double that with today. I'm being told that over 800 migrants have been intercepted in incidents in the British side of the Channel throughout the day, in 30 separate incidents, we believe, involving 30 separate small boats. When you know, we're now in the winter months, and they're still coming in very significant numbers like this, in very potentially dangerous weather conditions.
Well, there were 3 lost last week, of course, weren't there? Mark, you've worked in media longer than me. I'm a relatively new boy at all of this. Why is it that these people and competitor channels don't want to cover this story?
I think you're right. There has been an enthusiasm to cover COP26.
Which I understand.
And they've covered it wall to wall.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means resources are channeled away in a different direction. And when something like this happens, they're not able to respond as they might like, or they're a bit late to the game. I can say that I've been speaking to 1 or 2 people that we speak to on a regular basis down in Dover, and they have been contacted actually by pretty much all of the media in the past 12 hours, asking if they can get hold of any of the footage.
Well, if we've
So they are late to the party, but they are waking up.
Well, if we've helped here on GB News to ginger them up and start reporting that it's no bad thing. And Mark, I mean, I got the response last night from Dan O'Mahony, the clandestine channel threat commander. These journeys are illegal, dangerous and unnecessary and facilitated by violent criminal gangs profiting from misery. It's not even worth reading out. It's the same rubbish all the time. Is there anything coming from Priti Patel's office on this?
It's difficult to see how they can really get a proper grip of this unless you actually try to tackle it, perhaps at its source, in terms of the people trafficking operation further upstream, those who are buying the boats from, as we understand it, operations in Turkey and also in South Africa.
And we think in Turkey is where the new big boats are being manufactured.
These 11 metres, well, that's 35 feet, is it something like that? Yeah. So they can, I think they've held, the record is 86 people pulled off the channel on one of these boats already. So they're pretty big. They're not the biggest. We've seen some of them in the Mediterranean, but talk that some of those may be prepared as well to start.
This is the intelligence we've picked up, isn't it? That actually next year there'll be boats capable of carrying up to 200 at a time.
That's right, the ones that you've seen crossing the Aegean. Very big boats indeed. But even these 11-metre-long boats can carry an awful lot of people, and they always pack them out to the extent that they are very unseaworthy coming across. They're getting the motors from, as we understand, South Africa. They've run out of 40 horsepower motors and are going for 30 horsepower motors now instead. That's the trade they're doing. You would think that they could look at the manufacturers of these engines and these boats, try to find out who the sudden upsurge in customer interest is coming from.
Particularly in November. I mean, people buy outboards in May and June, but
And then follow intelligence leads back to who the organised criminal gangs are.
Well,
you would think.
We're a long way from it, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. In a moment, we'll cross to the other side of the pond to America, where not only have the Republicans won the governorship of Virginia with a massive swing, but actually, right across America, something very interesting happened yesterday. A backlash. Some are calling it a woke-lash.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To The Point.
No jab, no job. That's the case now by law in the care sector, and it will be, we're told, in the NHS by April of next year. I'm asking you, is that right? Is it reasonable? And it has led to shortages in the care sector. Arn on Twitter says, it doesn't make sense with a staffing shortage and when there is a natural immunity. Someone on Twitter says, no jab, no job makes perfect sense. If you want a Chinese-style social credit system, one viewer says, the jabbed are every bit as infectious, so pose no less threat to others, rendering this policy indefensible. We were told by Beverly, the lawyer, that there is evidence, and indeed it was backed up too by Mark, that there is evidence that if you had the jab, you're less likely to pass it on, but I need to be fully convinced of that too. Johnny says, if you're not vaxxed, you are only a greater risk to yourself. Your choice, or at least it should be. Well, that's rather where I come from, I have to say on this. Alex says, I would only be happy for my family members to remain in a care home if the staff had been jabbed. And yes, I'm guessing a lot of people would say that. Now, America has an endless series of elections. It is a very, very democratic country. You know, even at local government level, a lot of positions that here a civil servant would hold are up for election. The Americans have their chance. And for the last 2 nights, I've been telling you about this very important race for the governorship of Virginia. I said it looked like Biden's poll ratings were tanking. Kamala Harris's ratings have tanked even further. But actually, I think what happened last night in America was much bigger than just Virginia. Well, I'm very pleased to say that joining me on this subject from across the other side of the pond is Scott Rasmussen, American public opinion pollster and political analyst. Scott, good evening, or good afternoon to you.
Well, good evening to you, and thank you for having me.
No, not one little bit. Now, obviously, I follow the numbers that you produce all the time with huge interest. Let's start with Virginia, because that's the one that's making the news on this side of the pond. What interests me is, particularly in northern Virginia, which is, pretty well off, pretty affluent, generally not people that like Trump's Republican Party very much, and yet quite a few of them switched their votes yesterday, didn't they?
They did, and I think one part of it is it's no longer Donald Trump's party in the minds of some of those voters. It turns out that about 71% of Youngkin voters said it is quite possible to support Donald Trump's policies without supporting the former president. But on top of that, there were a whole range of issues. You already mentioned Biden's poll numbers were very bad. That dragged the party down somewhat. But Terry McAuliffe made the ultimate debate gaffe when he said parents shouldn't be telling schools what to teach their children. That riled up a lot of people.
Yeah, education did seem to be a big factor in Virginia. And in a moment, we'll talk about more broadly across America. But there is, some people are calling this woke clash. Is this a fight back against critical race theory? Is this parents just saying, look, we don't want our kids to be taught like this?
Well, I wouldn't use the term woke clash. And the reason I wouldn't use that is because most of the people who would be opposed to the woke ideology don't know what that term means. That's a term used by the political elites. However, a lot of people on the political left in this country have been saying we should get rid of photo ID requirements. 81% of voters in Virginia said, no, we should have that. 57% of Virginia voters said, if you're born a man, you should use the men's room. That's not where the woke ideology would take you. And we have issue after issue like that. And looking all across the United States, that elitist attitude, that sense of being out of touch, really cost the Democrats.
And more broadly across America, and I'm thinking about school board elections. You're very lucky in America. You can vote for school boards. We don't get the chance here to do that. Right. We need some reform here. But looking at the results across America, how big a night was this for the Republican Party?
It is hard to overstate how big a night for it was. Let me give one example. In southern New Jersey, now look, the Democrats won the governor's race in New Jersey, or at least it appears so, very closely. That should cause them more concern than actually losing the Virginia race. But in the southern part of the state, the president of the state Senate was defeated by a truck driver who spent $153 on his campaign. That's a stunning result. In Long Island, there were local county executive races that went the Republican way. Every judgeship that was voted on in Pennsylvania went the Republican way. This is a very serious issue. And it's not one or two issues. You know, you were talking earlier tonight about getting jabbed and the mandates. Well, what we found in America is about a third of voters know someone who will get jabbed against their will. And those voters are not happy about it. I mean, think of it. You're talking about it yourself. If someone is forced to get a jab because they can't afford to give up their job, they are going to vote for the other side. And that's happening along with all these other issues.
Absolutely fascinating. And Scott, the amazing thing is this. All this is happening, and Biden has only been sworn. It does feel a bit like he's losing with American politics. And thank you.
I will look forward to it.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you. Well, that was really interesting. And Scott Rasmussen really is one of the most respected pollsters in the USA. And he's telling us don't underestimate the scale of what happened across America yesterday. I love the idea of the truck driver spending $150 and winning a seat in the Senate in New Jersey. Now, in our Parliament today, Conservative Member of Parliament for North Shropshire, Owen Patterson, who had been found to have committed an egregious breach of lobbying rules, has avoided an immediate 30-day suspension after MPs voted for a government-backed proposal to overhaul their disciplinary processes. They chose not to back the Cross-Party Standards Committee's call for the ban last week after Parliament had ruled that he had repeatedly lobbied ministers and officials for two companies that between them paid him more than £100,000 a year. Instead, the House of Commons backed a Tory-led amendment calling for a review of his case after the party's MPs were ordered to support the bill, and Boris Johnson questioned whether the investigation into Mr Patterson was fair, as his party was accused of wallowing in sleaze. 250 people voted in favour, 232 against. Several Tories rebelled against their own whip. This case, on the face of it, is something the public hate. They don't like MPs with outside interests appearing to lobby for those interests. And that's perfectly understandable, because lots of that would take us back to the 1990s, to cash for questions and all of those scandals that beset the Tory party during Major's last days as Prime Minister. In this case, Owen Patterson came on with me here on GB News last Sunday morning. It was the only broadcast media interview. It was an exclusive for GB News that he did with any of the broadcast media in this country. The nub of Owen's case is that due process was not observed, that the witnesses he put forward were not called, that even he himself was not properly interviewed, and that they basically said, you are guilty. Today's judgment doesn't mean, to those who are cynical about this, he's got away with it. It means it will be looked at again. And I was very much in two minds over all of this. We need to clean up our politics. Goodness me, don't some of the post-prime ministerial antics of David Cameron shout that to you loudly and clearly. But I also believe that ever since Magna Carta, we've stood up and defended people's right to a fair trial. Moving on, the National Museum of Scotland, this is my What the Farage moment, could rename a gallery as they consider dropping the term discovery, deeming it to be an outdated term and to be inappropriate when used in relation to colonial exploration. The museum is considering renaming its Discoveries Gallery following work to decolonise its collection. The gallery's title, Discoveries, could be dropped. Well, I don't know. I mean, where will this all end? You can't just eradicate history. You can't just pretend that people weren't off discovering and doing things, because they were. You may not approve of the way in which people lived centuries ago, but surely the job of a museum is to reflect accurately life as it was, not life as the modern day curator would like it to be. And my final What the Farage of today, well, it's our old friends, Insulate Britain. Because a police officer was caught offering Insulate Britain protesters another 10 minutes to block a road in Birmingham as no arrests were made. Video footage from the scene of a protest Tuesday morning in Birmingham showed the officer saying, "Just be careful. I don't want to put good people in a cell." Listen very carefully to this clip and you'll hear the policeman talking to the protesters.
You've done what you needed to do today, and I'm happy for it to go on for like another 10 minutes. But after that, you don't want it to go on for another half hour because you're not going to prove anything more than you've already proven. But I don't want to put good people in a cell. I've seen that on the news. It's not good for anybody. So I'm asking you just to, if you're willing, just to work with me. Because like I said, you've got the children's hospital, you've got people that are dying, kids that are dying, people that are cancer therapies. Surely you don't want them to be hurt by your actions when you're trying to raise awareness to a legitimate cause.
You can't be reasonable with unreasonable people. And all over the country, we've seen how these people behave. And we've even seen, haven't we, on this show, quotes from senior figures saying even if someone's life was at risk in an ambulance, they wouldn't stop their protests. And I frankly think that police officer is appeasing the wrong people. It does not work. And Insulate Britain have very little public support in this country. And if our police officers carry on behaving like that and helping them, they'll find support for them drops too. In a moment, the GB News pub will open. It'll be time for Talking Pints, and I'll be joined by music impresario Pete Waterman.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
It's that time of the day, certainly my favourite time of the day. The GB News pub is fully open. It's Talking Pints, and I'm joined by music impresario Pete Waterman. Pete, welcome.
Cheers, thank you.
Now, we all know you, Stock Aitken Waterman, these amazing, unbelievable number of successes that you had, hundreds of hit records, unbelievable what you did. But what's really interesting are the jobs you did before all of that. I mean, just run us through some of the jobs that you did when you were young.
Well, I was a grave digger.
You grave digger, yeah.
Not for long, but I was a grave digger.
Yeah.
I went down the pit. I worked on the railway as a fireman, and I worked in the telecommunications industry as a technician.
What was it like working down the pit?
Well, it's a great story, this. I went down the pit, and I got to the bottom. At the time, I was well overweight. And I got to the bottom, and the guy said, "You're a bit of a big lad to be down here. I've got a job for you on top." making cement. So I actually only spent about an hour downstairs, and then I was on the top making cement. And I went from about 17.5 stone to about 11 stone in about 8 weeks. Don't think I've ever worked so hard in my life. It's dreadful.
What, making that was physically very hard work?
Yeah, I was mixing, I got a big mixer.
Yeah.
It was called no fines. In other words, there was no sand in it. You had to put like a coating, like a chocolate bar. And it was the way that water permeated through the concrete onto a membrane and went down drains.
And you worked at the railways for a bit.
I did, yep.
And you are a sort of full-on railway nut, basically.
Yeah, you could say that, yeah. I think would have been cheaper if I did drugs, yeah.
You've invested in all sorts of railways.
Yeah, I've travelled by train all my life.
Yep.
Didn't drive till I was about 26, 27. I've commuted by train since 1972, 71.
Yep.
I still do 3 or 4 train journeys a week. I do not understand why people drive cars. Although I have a very nice car and I sometimes have to drive it because it's the only place I can get. I have used public transport all my life and I've found it perfectly fit for purpose.
Home for you, the West Midlands, obviously.
That was, yeah. I live in the northwest now.
But very much well, this is even more relevant, right? Because I had the Conservative Member of Parliament for Lichfield sitting where you're sitting the other day. And we were talking about trains, and in particular HS2, and the cost of it. And his argument was, Michael Fabricant's argument was, well, actually from Lichfield to London is only like an hour and 15 minutes anyway, that from Manchester to London, I think the fastest trains are 2 hours, 6 minutes, 7 minutes.
Yeah.
That actually, is it really worth spending 150 billion quid?
And he's the MP for Lichfield, is he?
He's the MP for Lichfield, yeah.
Well, he ain't very bright then, is he?
Well, you tell me, because I'm not convinced.
Well, OK. Where's Coventry compared with Lichfield?
Oh,
further south, right?
Yeah, of course.
Well, I can tell you now that Coventry from Euston is exactly 1 hour, 100 miles exactly, right? Crewe on HS2 is 58 minutes. Crewe's farther up north than Lichfield ever will be, by a long way.
Does saving 10 minutes matter that much?
No, it's not saving 10 minutes, Nigel. Crewe is currently 1 hour and 35 minutes.
Well, 35 minutes,
yeah,
sorry.
It's going to save. Yeah. It's going to save 38 minutes, but more important, it moves Crewe from the North Midlands to the South Midlands. It puts it right at the heart.
So it'll drive more business to London?
No, it'll drive more business like me back to... Listen, I got this job because I could commute in under an hour. I didn't need to buy a house in London, so I came back, but I took my wealth back to the Midlands.
Yeah.
And when I really started this, where did I open my studios? In Manchester.
All right, so you're an HS2 enthusiast then?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a big cost, isn't it?
No, it's cheap.
No, it's not cheap.
It's cheap.
Well, how's it
Come
cheap?
on, how much has this pandemic cost us? And what have we got out of it?
Oh, I know that.
Nothing.
Well, I know that.
We haven't got anything out of it.
But isn't the point?
It's 20,000 jobs. Nigel, our problem has been...
That amount of money could be spent on infrastructure projects all over the United Kingdom.
No, it couldn't. It could not benefit. We cannot modernise the railway with patching it up. You've got places like Primrose Hill Tunnel. You've got Kilsby Tunnel. These tunnels are so big and so restrictive, they stop us.
It is a bit Victorian, some of the systems.
It's a complete Victorian.
I get that. I just look at the massive cost of it. But anyway, you
let's
are...
talk about the massive cost, right?
You know, I was
on transport for the...
It could be 150 billion quid, yeah?
OK, but I was a director of Transport for the North, one of the first directors on Transport for the North. I know how much subsidy the Treasury has to put into the Northwest to keep it afloat, OK? It's huge compared with what it has to put in London and the South East. London and the South East is this amazing place which pays for most of us to live. Well, let's put a bit more into the North East, the North West, the Midlands, because then it will generate more.
If I really thought it would, I might change my mind. But I'll tell you what puts me off ever so slightly. The TGV in France, all right? You know, I spent lots of time in France as an MEP, going to Strasbourg and all the rest of it. When I was first elected to the European Parliament, it was 5 hours from Paris to Strasbourg. By the time I left the European Parliament, it was 2 hours, 14 minutes. I mean, completely different.
Yeah. Bigger country, though.
Yeah, no. Marseille was 6 hours from Paris, but with the TGV, it was 3 hours from Paris. And Lyon, correspondingly, again, much, much closer. And The experience in France was that a lot more businesses in Marseille headquartered in Paris than they had before. It drove business into Paris. Now, if it works the other way around here, I get the point, but I'm not sure.
We have... right, well, let's take Warrington, where I live.
Yep.
Has a unique place. Unique. More people come into Warrington to work than going to Manchester or Liverpool. That's because Warrington has built a case around the nuclear industry. So if you look at Warrington, there's more people go in than go out in the morning for jobs.
And good roads.
Yes.
Around Warrington, the roads are,
because
they are good.
There's a great industry.
Yeah,
So it proves that if you do build it, which is why I worked so hard to get Crewe as the first, hub for HS2, because it opens the whole of the Northwest, North Wales.
When this is completed, it'll stop in Birmingham, it'll stop in Crewe.
Yep.
And then...
Manchester. And then we hope Liverpool and Warrington will come off on a spur.
And then there was the line that was going to go up to Leeds, wasn't there?
Nigel, that's the problem. And I'll tell you why it's a problem. It's not a problem of the cost or what it is. It's a problem of the people that live in that part of the world that don't want it built, that can't see like we did in the Northwest, like Andy Burnham and the people in Crewe and Warrington and Liverpool. We see there's a massive benefit for bringing it there. When I was on the commission for the Treasury, that we went round Britain looking at the value that we could get at this, we found absolute apathy, and I mean apathy, in the East Midlands and Yorkshire. It was just, they didn't want to know.
No.
So if they don't want to know, you're not going to get it. If you don't fight for it, you're not going to get it, are you?
Well, Pete, I have to say, your passion for this is it's real. It's very, very, very
it's
strong.
Real,
Yeah, I'm still not totally convinced, but you've put the argument, and I'm very, very pleased to hear it. But when you were doing all these different jobs, the grave digging and cement making and briefly going down the pit and all the rest of it, collecting records, this was clearly... I mean, were you kind of... Rock and roll was just really kicking off, I guess, in the late 50s, or...?
Well, I started collecting, I think, in truth... I remember, buying a Woolworths radio with, 2 earphones. I was about, I guess, 6 or 7, 8. Got it for Christmas, and I could go in, into bed. And my mum didn't know this, because she'd have died if she thought I was in bed listening to the radio. But I used to listen to American Forces Network, Radio Luxembourg, and stations like that. And I started to collect, the records that you heard. And they fascinated me. The cultural thing really fascinated me. And I was lucky enough that I had an aunt who lived in Leicestershire. And of course, the nuclear strike force in those days was at Bruntingthorpe and Upper Hayford, which were very much within my patch. And my mum and dad used to go to a pub at the end of the runway at Bruntingthorpe, and the American GIs used to come out, and they used to bring the records from the jukebox and give them to my mum, because they played Skittles in the pub. And so I started collecting these American records, And then, you start doing parties, because you've got these records that kids don't know.
So you're in demand?
Yeah. I get 10 bob and a barrel of beer, one of them tanks, what they were called bumper packs. The worst beer in the world, weren't they? Bloody awful.
Was it Watney's or whatever?
Oh, God. Family packs, I think. You sit in the corner and play records, and I got 10 bob. Well, my dad was probably earning, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 quid in the factory. I was getting 10 bob for playing records at that I loved. So I thought, well, there's got to be something in this.
And when does the real revolution start?
When I met the Beatles.
Is it the Beatles?
Oh, yeah, without question. I mean, that night...
60, 62, 3?
62.
Yeah.
I was at their first gig as the Beatles. I'd been John Lennon and the Silver Beatles the night before.
Yep.
They were on the way back from Hamburg to Liverpool, and they stopped in at...
So you're just there as a fan?
No. Yes, I was there as a fan.
Yeah.
I called in at the Matrix Ballroom. Remember Matrix Stalls? They used to have a ballroom, which was a social club. And they were on there on their way back. And I'd never seen anything like them. I mean, I'd worked with lots of acts and seen lots of acts at that point. But, these 4 lads went on stage, and Ringo Starr still wasn't with them at that point. And they just went on stage and went, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I went, what? It was like, whoa, what is this? It was like, I guess like punk was. It was so energetic, so different. And, they had Levi jeans on. Well, we didn't see Levi jeans in Coventry. I mean, only Americans wore Levi jeans. My God, they got Levi jeans on. And this guitarist had a Jet Atkins, Gretsch. It's like, wow, this guy's got a Gretsch, you know. They must be American. Couldn't understand them anyway because they talk, you know, from Liverpool. So it was like, but it was just an impact. It was like, okay, this is giving me goosebumps. Why is it giving me goosebumps? Because this is what I want to do, you know. This is like...
But it took off, didn't it?
Oh, and you know, people forget, and you try, you know, I do lecture occasionally, just colleges. There was no social media.
No.
BBC didn't had the Home Service and the Light programme, you know. And within 3 weeks of me seeing them at the...
And no Radio 1.
No Radio 1. Within 3, no pirate radio at all, only Radio Luxembourg. Within 3 weeks, they played at the Nuneaton Co-op Hall, and it was packed. I mean, packed. So just in 3 weeks, they'd gone from probably 40 people at the venue that I was at till 2,500. And of course, then within a month and a half, all the daily papers have picked up Beatlemania.
Amazing. And you decide this is it.
Yeah, this is it.
I've got to be in music.
Yeah, because you
But how do you, as someone that not coming with any particular advantages to all of this, how do you go to where you got to in the 80s? I mean, how does all that happen?
Just decide to do it.
Simple as that.
Yeah, because I can't read and write. So
this is the other thing I was fascinated by.
No, I couldn't read or write, so I couldn't be told. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing was different. You know, I didn't know you couldn't do this. I didn't understand that there were barriers to this. I just never understood that. Because to me, there were no barriers. You know, when I saw these bands, you know, the Beatles play, and they played things like Mr. Moonlight and Hippie Hippie Shake. Well, I've got these records that I've been playing for months, you know, and it's like, well, they're doing what I do. They're obviously talented enough to do it on a guitar, but I've got the records, so I can make people as entertained. So I didn't see that whole thing about you can't do this because you've got to go to work at 7:30 in the morning. It's like, no, I'll go at 7:30 in the morning.
Right, it's fascinating.
But if I've got to get home for 1 o'clock, I'll get home.
And you finish up Stockacre Waterman, and you've got the lot, haven't you? You know, Banana Rama and all these big hits. And how many top 10 hits did you...
Oh, God, 22 number ones, I think we had.
22 number ones. Was it all just mass market, easy?
No, it was hard work.
Was it good music, or was it just commercial music?
It's still around now, so I only make commercial music. Yeah. I don't make music people to judge me by. That's not what I'm interested in.
They either like it or they don't.
I don't like... listen, I need their cash.
Yep.
Pay me in cash, don't pay me in gold watches. It's like Mozart. It's like, you won't offend me by giving me a £5. Okay, so if you don't want to review my records, that's fine. Just, you know, I always said to people that gave me all this grief, hang on, I walk down the street, kids walk up to me and say, when's the next Bananarama album out? Yeah. In other words, when can I give you another £5? How many people are lucky enough to walk down the street and kids say, would you like a £5? Yeah, oh, thank you very much.
It's amazing. And how have you found living with that kind of fame?
Easy, actually, Nigel. If you don't want it, you don't go out. You stay in.
Yeah.
When you go out, you're in the public
and people want to talk to you the whole time.
And people want to talk to you. Then that's what you've got to do. That's what you get paid to do.
Yeah.
If you don't want to go out, I don't go out. You know, when I go out on the railway, people talk to me because they know that, you know, they've got an opinion about the railway. Not everything the railway does is perfect, but it does in the majority of cases. You know, we've just had this whole fiasco at the weekend where they're trying to save the planet. Well, we've been, you know, on the railway, let's be honest, we've been penny pinching, we've been, you know, recycling carriages for the last 75 years.
Are you a bit sceptical about net zero then?
I'm sceptical about people that turn up in entourages, private jets, private yachts, and try and tell me that they're there to save the planet. And, you know, I'm listening to the BBC about climate change, and then they have a programme about going to Mars, you know, and having private flights around the Earth. You're going, hang on a minute, whoa, wait a minute. If we take it serious, let's take it serious.
Yeah.
But then we're too far along the line now of blurring the lines between what you can recycle and what isn't proper. In other words, big business can come in front too many times of practicalities. I mean, we do things on the railway now, 10 years ago, we would have never thought about doing.
Well, who would have known? Who would have known that getting Pete Waterman in, we get a lecture about railways, we'd be told all about the Beatles in the early days, and a guy who's achieved that level of success, who, as he says, couldn't read and write properly. Amazing. Pete Waterman, thank you for joining me here on Talking Pints.
Cheers.
Cheers. Well, that was great. It's the end of the show. It's now Barrage the Farage, where you send in your questions that I don't get any chance to see beforehand. So fingers crossed, and here goes. Jackie asks me, if the GPs go on strike, will anybody even notice? Well, that's a very good question. Look, I'm really... What's disappointing, and I've made this point more than once here, is that GPs were the most respected members of our local communities. We all looked up to the GP. They were the people that came to visit the house when your kids were ill or your dad was ill or whatever it was. And I feel they've withdrawn from society. I worry that the British Medical Association now sound more like a trade union. And I think we're starting to lose some respect for GPs, and that is not a good thing. Clive asks me, here we go, if Trump got the nomination to stand again, would you cross the pond and support him? Look, I like Donald Trump. I think he stands for the right things. I think in terms of recognising the threat that China poses to the rest of us, he was way ahead of the game and has woken people up. And I think, frankly, when it comes to the whole cancel culture, woke agenda, Trump believes in free speech. I believe in free speech. Some people don't like his style. He's a bit of a brash New Yorker, but I've always supported him. And yes, I always will. Clive asks me. No, I've done that one. Camilla asks me, if you could choose any job in the world, what would it be? I think having a pint with Pete Waterman actually isn't too bad, frankly. I think it's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Right, I've got... no, that's it. We're done. We're over. Pete, thanks ever so much.
Nigel, thank you.
For coming in. It's been terrific. Really, really interesting. Been a big day, again, in the English Channel. We'll get the final numbers. We were absolutely right yesterday telling you what it would be. 800 or so it'll be again today. It's a big problem for this government. Coming up next here on GB News, it's Colin Brazier. First, though, the all-important weather.
Hello again. Clearing skies overnight will lead to a frost in places by Thursday morning. But despite the chilly start, plenty of sunshine throughout the day for many places. Not for all, though. We've still got a northerly wind across the country, high pressure to the west. And that northerly wind continues to feed some cloud and showers into mainly coastal parts of eastern England, as well as western England and West Wales. The showers in the north of Scotland, Northern Ireland, tending to ease away overnight, and inland clearing skies will lead to those plummeting temperatures. We're looking at temperatures dropping to 3 to 6 Celsius generally, but in sheltered parts of England, Wales and southern and central Scotland, a few degrees below freezing possible first thing Thursday. But a bright start for many, plenty of sunshine. I think sunnier skies for central and southern England compared to what we saw through Wednesday. Still some showers feeding into the North Sea coast and West Wales as well as Cornwall. But on the whole, but still a gusty, cold wind, and the temperatures a little below average for the time of year, 8 to 11 Celsius. And cloud then spills into the north and northwest of Scotland on Thursday night. That then eventually reaches Northern Ireland and southern Scotland by midnight. With that, clear skies and lighter wind will lead to a more widespread frost, low temperatures as well, as low as -3 in some sheltered spots first thing Friday. But you can see the clear blue skies there across much of the south on Friday, and it stays largely sunny in the south throughout much of the day. But thicker cloud feeds into the north and more especially the northwest, where there will be some light outbreaks of rain. More unsettled weather in the northwest through the weekend, drier further south and turning a little milder for all of us.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it, and also they work for less. See you there.
Reported from more than 70 countries around the world, wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. Experience that feel for events to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell.
Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the
Politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the channel, banging on about law and order. We're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Very good evening. It's 8 p.m. on Brazier tonight as the number of illegal migrants reaching Britain by boat breaches the 21,000 mark. Are we really going to see 4 or 5 times that number next year? Also, Britain's strictest head teacher says adults mustn't be afraid of China.